Hello, I'm Jane Fonsale. For those of you who don't know, I'm the Chief Exec here at Working Families, and we're delighted to welcome you to our webinar on making flexible working more inclusive in partnership with our friends at Bright Horizons. A bit about Working Families. We're the UK's national charity for working parents and carers. Our mission is to remove the barriers that people with caring responsibilities face in the workplace. We do this in three key ways: by empowering working parents and carers through our free legal advice service, by supporting employers to improve their flexible and family-friendly practices, and by driving legislative change by influencing policymakers. And one of our big policy successes this year has been the flexible working legislation that comes into effect next year. The changes will give millions of people access to flexible working by making the right to request a day one right, and removing the requirement for requestees, it's a good word, to explain how the arrangement will work. And this is great news for employers too, because our survey for National Work-Life Week, we found that 89% of parents would feel more loyal to an employer that offered flex. 86% would be more productive with a flexible working arrangement, and 89% said flexible working would have a positive effect on their well-being. Today, I'm joined by Paula Arnold, the Director of Services Consultancy at Diversifying Group, who will be moderating today. Thank you so much, Paula. I'm also delighted to introduce our panelists: Jennifer Liston-Smith, Head of Thought Leadership at Bright Horizons, Max Askwith, Global Innovation Partner at Denstu, and Denstu's UK Parent and Carer Committee member, and Kelly Spratt, Culture and Wellbeing Specialist at the Bank of Ireland. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Before I hand over to Paula, just a little bit of housekeeping. At the end of this session, we will have time for any questions you have for our panelists. Please put the questions you'd like the panelists to answer in the Q&A, and we'll address them at the end. Anything else you can put into the chat. So it's great to welcome you all today, and I'm simply now going to hand over to Paula. Paula, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jane, and welcome everybody. I'm really excited to be here today, both for two reasons: in a professional capacity and in a personal capacity. It's something I'm very, very passionate about. Having the right work-life balance, and the work that Working Families do is amazing. And as Jane has indicated, that work now that's leading to legislation changes is so important for a lot of individuals, including myself. So really pleased to see that happening. A bit of background. So I'm the director of the consultancy services business for the Diversifying Group. We help organisations to become more inclusive of all individuals from different backgrounds, and whether that's through training, events, and the consultancy offering that we have. For me personally, a situation arose in my life about 9 years ago when I was pregnant with my daughter, at 7 months pregnant, and unfortunately was suddenly widowed. So had a big change in life, where I obviously had my life planned. It was a planned pregnancy. We had our situation sorted in what the finances were going to look like, how I was going to manage work, and what the nursery or childcare arrangements were going to be. And having such a sudden shift in my life at that point was a big life change, but also could have potentially been a big change in my career and where life took me and how I was going to manage work. Fortunately, I work for a very progressive organisation who were quite forward-thinking and had the right policies and processes in place to support me in adjusting my working arrangements, and making life possible to carry on with a new child and my change of situation. So that for me was a massive eye-opener, and massively beneficial that I was in the right organisation at that point in my life. And I am just very keen to make sure that other people are looked after in the same way, and have the opportunities to continue their careers when life situations change. So that's my main reason for being here, and very excited that we've got an amazing panel to talk through this topic with today as well, and understand what they're doing to help others with this. Before we get started, I'm going to just pass over to Jennifer firstly, as the main sponsor and official partner to Working Families for National Work-Life Week, because I know she's got a few things to say as well.
Lovely. Thanks so much, Paula. So Bright Horizons is absolutely delighted to partner again with Working Families. We've collaborated a great deal over several years. And this year, as you say, partnering on National Work Life Week, which intersects really strongly with the work of Bright Horizons. What we're about, our mission, is to enable work and family to work more positively and smoothly together for both employer and employee. We work with over 400 organisations in the UK, over 1,300 globally. We do things like workplace nurseries, providing backup care, so gap cover or emergency care needs when care doesn't work out on a given day. And these things go really hand in hand with flexibility, because often people need the flexibility and they need the practical support in order to deliver at work and get things done. We do things like coaching, particularly coaching through the parent transition, and a lot of online resources and supports. We provide a lot of events for parents and carers networks. So we're right in that positive relationship between employer and employee. And of course, flexibility, our topic today, plays a key part in that. And we believe that just as families are extremely different and unique according to whichever makeup of family people have, and that can include pets as well as humans, so flexibility is also very wide-ranging. So it's great to be part of this conversation today, and as we say, really delighted to support it.
Thank you, Jennifer, both for the insights and the great work that Bright Horizons do as well. It's great to have that much needed support as well. So thank you. Well, great. Okay, so we are now ready to move on to the panel discussion, which I'm very excited about. We've got 3 great individual panelists here to answer a number of questions that we have. We're going to ask each panelist a few questions, one at a time. And each panelist is going to have about 4 minutes to answer the question. So not wanting to sound too officious, but to make sure we get through everything in good time and that everyone gets to talk about the great stuff that they're doing. So then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end as well. So first question, and I'll direct this one firstly to Kelly, who's the Culture and Wellbeing Specialist at Bank of Ireland. Great to have you with us, Kelly. How have you gone about creating a work environment that allows people to find the flexibility they need, no matter what their situation, so that they can feel supported and are able to thrive both at work and at home?
Good morning, Paula, and thanks for the question. I actually hadn't planned to share this, but prompted by what you've shared this morning, I was quite the opposite. I had an unplanned pregnancy at 21. And it's something that I'll circle back to a little bit later, because I feel like you can create a lot of flexibility, you can have lots of policies and supports in place for colleagues, but often there's a stigma as well that's associated with the flexibility that's required, right? And I know that very early in my career, I didn't feel like I could say that I had a daughter. I tried to hide it completely because I didn't want that to prevent me from opportunities, or to be judged as well, because I was so young. So I will circle back to that a little bit later, but to answer your specific question, which I actually feel is very appropriate, because helping you thrive is actually our org purpose in Bank of Ireland. So more specifically then, I suppose, when we look at our workplace wellbeing ethos, and this is where we create this flexibility, is power down and recharge. Sounds long, but it basically just means finding a better balance in life. And we use 4 W's to be able to explore that balance and how it's at any given time. They are well-being, working day, workspace or workplace, and workload. So we try to empower colleagues through these 4 W's to find the flexibility that they need, they know themselves best, and to feel really supported, whether they're working in the office or at home. I think we've also demonstrated real commitment to power down and recharge and this elusive balance by this year specifically, even though we introduced this concept back when the right to disconnect became big in early 2021. This year we've shown real commitment to it by including it actually as a speaking point in our quarterly reviews. So we've just introduced a new performance management system this year that has 3 pillars. So well-being is one, and performance and development are the other 2. So I think as an organization, we're saying that we value your well-being just as much as your performance and your development. And flexibility is obviously a key part of you feeling well at work. So I'll tell you really, really briefly just about those 4 W's. Well-being is obviously what it says on the tin. It's your mental, physical, and financial well-being, but also in more recent years, social well-being too. And what I would say is there's lots of supports in place for colleagues to help them and their families. So with things like online GP services, I know in the UK, you guys have a really great NHS. In Ireland, we actually don't have that. And about 70% of our workforce are based here, the rest in the UK. We have to pay €65 every time we go to see our GP. So we said, this is, really not fair. So we introduced an online GP service, which has been really helpful for our colleagues from a financial perspective, but also from not having to take time off work. Consults are online in 15 minutes. I've used it myself with my daughter when she wasn't well, and she didn't have to get changed out of her pajamas to go and attend an in-person clinic. So it's amazing. Our EAP then is also available for free to our families at home over the age of 16. And then we have a range of different free on-site and digital gym and physical well-being options as well that are all free for our colleagues and their families at home. So I suppose that those kind of things help us take the cost out of keeping us and our families home, well, whether we're at home or at work. Working day then, and I won't go into too much detail on the other 2 W's, but working days, I suppose, really where Power Down and Recharge can be brought to life, because this is all about the way we work, right? It's our rituals and our routines. It's when and how we start and finish work, how we take regular breaks throughout the day. And, if we need to do the school run, or, we need to finish up a little bit early for hobby drops or whatever, it's allowing us to decide how we structure our day and our time. Also, it's a little bit about how we structure our day, right? So that we don't have calls back to back, that we have enough quiet time to focus and write and plan. We captured these sort of rules of engagement, if I would say, in our team charter, kind of more high level, but it just means that, if I, as I said, need to be able to do the school run in the morning, me and my team, along with my manager, agree that there's no calls before 9:30 or 10, and no calls after 4. So I know that I don't have to keep dipping out or, feel like I'm having to make up for fulfilling the role that I'm doing, whether that's for, as I said, kids, or whether you're in a caring role and you need to do some caring visits.
That's great, Kelly. Thank you. There's lots of great initiatives there. And I think it also just goes to show that importance of having someone with the lived experience in the roles that are helping to implement some of these changes and policies and processes as well, so that you really know what people need, and to be able to communicate that with others. So that's great. Thank you, Kelly. Max, can I ask you the same question, please?
Yes, absolutely. Hello. Thank you, Paula, and good morning to everybody. Or hello, if you're not in a morning place. So at Denstu, Denstu is a big advertising agency network. My role isn't in an HR function. I'm very much kind of on a kind of client facing basis, but I've involved myself within our parent carers committee, as was mentioned earlier. So flexible working is a big priority at Denstu, and that's why the policies that we have are granted as day one rights, rather than after 26 weeks, which I think is the kind of legal requirement. So a clear indication of how we see value in flexible ways of working, and how that starts to come to life is we have the option of compressed hours, either 4 days a week or 9 days a fortnight, and I actually do the latter. So I have every other Friday off, which is great for me, and I compress my hours elsewhere by starting a bit early, and my manager does the same, so we alternate those weeks off, and it's been really kind of game-changing for me and my wife, in that I get an extra day with my 1-year-old daughter. It helps us save a bit of money on nurseries, but that kind of bonding experience has been really kind of great for me personally, and a lot of our our employees do that, whether they're parents or not as well, have that kind of flexibility. We've also then obviously got the option of flexi time, different working hours depending on your situation, and we're really encouraged to do that. I think as long as the work gets done, then to an extent it doesn't really matter when you're doing it. It's obviously on a kind of case-by-case basis, but that's certainly something that we're looking into. And generally speaking, we recognise that balance between working in an office environment and working from home and having that flexibility. There are benefits and pros and cons. The maximum, or the line from Denstu is it's maximum 3 days a week in the office. I'm once or twice a week. A lot of my colleagues are very similar, and it really works. And I think it's case by case, it's flexibility, it's within a culture of appreciating that people have got lives outside of work and actually work more productively when you do have that kind of flexible working. And on top of all of those policies that actually apply for everybody, whether they're parents or not, we've also got something which has been brilliantly championed by our Parents and Carers Committee, which is something for returning parents. So it's a group called, appropriately called, the Sleepless Bunch, which effectively is a group that bring together people who are returning to work, helping people connect, helping share information from the business, helping share concerns and lived experience from people that have been through it or are going through it. And it was certainly really helpful for me, but it's from a business perspective, it's really helpful as that feedback loop from the people that are living, huge life changes, back to a manager, a team, a division within the organisation as well. So there's quite a few things that are available within flexible working, and then all the way through to specific resources for new parents as well.
Love that. Thank you, Max. Great to hear the examples of managers leading by example and enabling that type of environment too, as well as having the support networks around you being created as well. So that's great to hear. Thank you. And Jennifer, same question to you, please.
Thanks very much, Paula. So I think I can answer this in two ways, really, because the question is, how have we created a work environment that allows people to find the flexibility they need? And I think there's two ways in which Bright Horizons does that. One is we are a really large business. I mentioned earlier what we do with employers. Actually, within the UK, we have 7,000 people who work as part of Bright Horizons, and a large part of that workforce are those who deliver early years education to really little people in our community nurseries. So that's quite a sort of hands-on frontline workforce, which is really different from the other perhaps specialist services, professional services teams that might be running finance or HR or indeed our client services. So thinking about that, one of the things that we've done in relation to flexibility is with those teams that are early years educators. We have a scheme called Bright Flex, which is all about joining the early years workforce, but with a view to doing that flexibly. And that's been really successful. So it's given people choices. I mean, there's flexible working options across the board anyway, but that's a specific one where people are working part-time. And one of the things that's happened over time with the Bright Flex people is that they've been attached to specific nurseries. They used to be deployed more generally, and now that's heightened their sense of belonging to have a sort of home nursery. And it's also increased the hours that they wish to work. And that word belonging is really important because we have a DEEB group, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion and Belonging in Bright Horizons, which is very vibrant, chaired by my colleague Amanda Jane McCann, and formerly chaired by Mark Hamilton Anderson, who is now our DEEB sort of devoted role. And so that sense of belonging is really at the heart of what we're trying to achieve with the workforce, and doing that with people that are working in a non-conventional way in a frontline role is one of those achievements. I think there are other ways that are worth noting as well, that in addition to how people use their day, it's about things like having lifestyle breaks. People can take 6 weeks to 52 weeks out if they need or wish to, and that can happen sometimes when there's a big lifestyle change at home. But the other side of the question is, what have we enabled other employers to do? And I'd like to mention that. So We support employers, as I mentioned, with things like backup care, workplace nurseries. So some stats from our recent research, the work and family snapshot we carry out every year with our clients' employees. We had over 1,700 doing it this year. We found out in that those who have a workplace nursery, 91% agreed that it made it easier to do their job. 91% also agreed that it improved their productivity and their well-being. So there's something going on there about engagement and enabling the way that people work. And it also, when we think about backup care as one of those other services, we were asking people to agree or disagree to a range of statements. And one of those statements was how confident, or I feel confident discussing work-related issues or family-related issues with my employer. And when it came to family-related issues, the general population has got more free with talking about family at home in recent years. So back in 2015, only 47% agreed they were comfortable talking about family with their employer, rose to 55% just before COVID in 2020. This year it was 71%, so over 7 in 10 happy talking to their employer about family at work. However, when you have a workplace nursery in place and they're using that, 84% feel comfortable talking about family. So I think that in addition to flexibility, having those services in place both helps people to feel more engaged and productive. So it's a real kind of harmonizing enabler alongside flexibility. And it also reaches the culture and makes the culture more inclusive and more open.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Jennifer. I think where you've got those tools embedded in the workplace, that can only help to promote the fact that it is a family-friendly environment. And I love the fact that Bright Horizons is in a fairly unique position of being able to give the flexible working to the people that work for the organisation, but also support others in creating those environments as well. So another question is something we hear quite a lot with our clients when we work at through Diversifying Group and interact with organisations who are trying to become a bit more flexible. We quite often hear there are employees who say, well, yeah, it's great, we've got all the right policies and processes in place, but it depends on who your manager is, on whether those things are implemented in the right way. So how do you train your line managers to ensure that all the employees benefit from consistency and equality across the board? So Kelly, can I come to you again with that question first?
Yeah, thank you. So we obviously use a mix of kind of mandatory and elective web-based training, that type of thing, to ensure a general, I suppose, minimum competency when it comes to ensuring consistency. But then on top of that, we've developed more targeted courses specifically for our people managers only. And we've been running those for the past number of years under the umbrella called Show We Care. And I suppose the focus for those is largely mental health related. It's on spotting warning signs that someone might be struggling and showing how to signpost the range of supports that are available. We'd 78% of our people managers complete the last iteration of that course, which is, you know, really, really high level of engagement, given that we didn't make it mandatory. And I suppose we can put that level of engagement down to building over time senior leader and CEO involvement. And as part of that course, they open it and they share their own personal experience or their own personal vulnerability. And that's been so powerful in showing our people managers that we're a people first organization and that we need to really support and care for our colleagues. Some of the topics in the series that we covered were stress and burnout awareness was huge last year. Suicide prevention and crisis scenarios as well, so that they know about the emergency response that's there. We've also covered then extensively last year fertility, sexual health, baby loss and menopause as topics around women and supporting families in the workplace. So I suppose the idea is to provide that understanding of the topic that's at hand, but then also how it affects us at work or at home, so that our managers feel more comfortable talking about it. And you know, if it's one of those scenarios is to arise. because we know that it's not always comfortable to talk about some of those types of topics. So the course itself kind of gives them some reassurance, and we always say you don't have to be an expert. There's always a path to expertise. You just need to show you care. I know in the past kind of maybe year or 2 years, there's been a little bit of focus around language, and we've tried to steer clear from that, because what we're finding is that there can be some fear about saying the wrong thing, and then you end up saying nothing at all. So we're kind of just trying to encourage our managers we're giving them that basic level of understanding and awareness, and then saying, if you're coming from the right place, you kind of can't get it too wrong. So we've set a really clear expectation, is what I would say, as an employer, that our managers must show genuine care for the colleagues that report to them. And our employee relations team have made some fantastic progressive policy enhancements as well to kind of like back that up. So we've got fully paid fertility and menopause leave up to 10 days per annum. With things like surrogacy and adoptive leave that's enhanced now so that it matches our maternity leave entitlement. And yeah, I think the message there is that let's learn about these topics, but talk about them openly also, so that we can reduce stigma and colleagues feel better able to bring their whole selves to work, even on bad days or during tougher times.
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, that's really great to hear that those things are being implemented and got the support from the top down as well. I think leading by example is really important. And yeah, some really great things being talked about there. And I love the bit that you talked about with the language piece, because that's something else people do get very fearful of saying the wrong thing or at the wrong time. And that's something we promote as well. Have the conversation. You will get things wrong from time to time, and you can apologise, but it's more important to have the conversation and deal with the issues. So that's great. Thank you, Kelly. Max, how do you go about training your managers?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of cultural similarities as well between, what has just been spoken about and at Denstu as well. And I bring the perspective here as a manager myself, rather than somebody who necessarily kind of sits in a specific HR function, but hopefully that's a helpful perspective all the same. So how do we train our managers to ensure consistency and equality? Well, we've got a really well-established system of training and support specifically built for managers, and a big focus is on reducing bias, having honest, confident conversations with our colleagues, which I think is a theme that's developing from this. And from my experience, and I've been with Denstu for quite a while, I think training has never been more ample and certainly never been more readily available, which I think is key. Having that access and just knowing where to go for it is kind of step one. Some of the modules that we cover within that specific training include guidance on how to manage virtual teams. This is a new skill set for the majority of us. We're still learning and developing, and I think that's really important kind of guidance. There's also guidance on managing performance within remote and hybrid environments, how to support return to work anxiety. Kelly mentioned stress and burnout, and it's something we're keenly aware of as well. And even the anxiety of going into the office once or twice a week is still there for a lot of people. And I certainly have it if I've just dropped off my poorly daughter to nursery, the anxiety of thinking, am I going to have to get back on a train as soon as I get to work? And there's all these things that I think go into that appreciation of what's going on. And so it kind of goes without saying, obviously everybody's situation is different, and therefore it's as much about training managers on the specific flexible working policies, but also why the policies are the way they are. So the approach is to give people the tools and support they need to make proactive choices in an atmosphere of trust. I think what's worked really well for us, and again, Kelly mentioned this earlier, is establishing charters. So team, individual, client charters. These are agreements and how we will work together as a team or on a project. And it's collaborative, it's top down, but also bottom up, agreeing what works best for everybody and ensuring that we can really provide the best service for our clients, but also be productive and have a great work-life balance as well.
Thanks, really Thanks a lot, Max, for those insights as well. I love the key bits as you were talking about this empathy piece and understanding where people are coming from, the fact that you're part of the parents network and there are networks there that other people in the organisation can draw on to understand those lived experiences as well, are so important. And I love the fact at the beginning as well, you emphasise that you don't work in HR, because I think there's an automatic default, isn't there, to always think, oh, this is the role of HR to put these things in place and lead the way on this, but actually it does need to be owned by everyone in the business. So that's great. Thank you.
Absolutely, 100%.
Jennifer, how do you train your managers?
Yeah, so again, probably a question of two halves here in terms of our internal and our external work in this. So internally, talking of charters, as Kelly and Max have, we're one of the signatories to the Mindful Business Charter. And I think that is beginning to have an effect through the business. So that's all about doing business, more thoughtfully, both with other businesses that one works with. The charter was set up by banks and law firms, thinking about how they collaborate. Many of them are our clients, but we're one of the first that's in the childcare provision sector to sign up. And it's about, thoughtful meetings, thoughtful communications, thoughtful delegation. And we're already seeing an impact at all levels of the organisation, including senior levels. People, sending emails at appropriate times, and also having signatures that talk about when they work, or, excusing themselves if they're sending an email that's not at a time when someone else is working. So I think little things like that make a big cultural difference. Culture is incredibly important at Bright Horizons. We have values. I know organisations mostly have values, but we have values that everybody lives and breathes. They spell out the word heart. They're honesty, excellence, accountability, respect, and teamwork. Everybody who works for us can reel them off. And, part of that respect is thinking about when people are working, what's appropriate. And so that's a part of it. There's a lot of training for managers. There's a leaders talent program. So there's a huge amount of internal coaching as well as training that goes on. We have a forum, which I think is really helpful. It's called Be Heard. The BH comes into there from Bright Horizons. And that brings together and brings up through the organisation concerns that people have. So ways of working are often really represented there. So those are just a couple amongst many examples of how managers are kind of trained and encouraged. In terms of other employers, we've carried out lots of sessions with our law firms in particular, but across many sectors, training line managers around exactly what Kelly was talking about, how on earth to have those conversations that one doesn't know how to start with an individual that's going off on some kind of parental leave or returning. And actually, if people are concerned about what to say, then giving them simple checklists that look at, even the effective use of a keeping in touch day. How can you help that person to network with others across the organisation, make sure that they know people that might be new in the team, the kind of people skills that some people have and not everybody has. But with things, we've got an online toolkit and app called the Parental Leave Toolkit that handholds the individual and the manager through the parent transition. And so if you're serving up to both the individual and the manager checklists for the conversations they're going to have at different stages, that's going to make more consistency, even if it weren't naturally going to happen, because some people are just more experienced or naturally capable in talking with others, and some not so much. They have other skills. So this actually brings about a consistency. So I would say either resources, whether it's a resource like the Parental Leave Toolkit or internally created checklists, really help to give the conversation a name, an expectation, and a structure. And also, as I say, we've run a lot of sessions where managers put peer pressure on each other, and say to each other, well, you can't talk about it that way. And, really then good practice is shared by people challenging each other. So I think there's a lot there that we've learned about good practice in terms of culturally embedding and normalizing what a good conversation looks like for somebody who's a parent, who's a carer, who works flexibly for whatever reason.
It's lovely, thank you. Even those tiny examples of things that just as simple as sending an email either at the right time or having those detail about working hours in the signatures, I think that's not only a reflection of the values and culture of an organisation, but then because that's external facing, it does put the pressure on other organisations as well to think a bit more about how they're interacting and what they do for their own staff as well. So that's great, thank you. One final question before we go to Q&A, and I'm quite conscious we are running a couple of minutes over time, so if we try and keep these answers as succinct as we can so we can get back on some of those as well. There's obviously a diverse range of backgrounds that people are coming from and needs that they have in their lives when they're applying for positions in your organisations. So what processes have you found to be beneficial to approach recruitment more fairly and ensure that a wide pool of talented people can apply and be successfully appointed into roles as well? So Kelly, coming back to you.
Yeah, thank you. So I suppose measurement is probably the first thing to set out. It's key. You know, we don't know that we're doing well without indicators of success or clear goals to work towards. So we've set that out in our recruitment charter. We set targets and tracking mechanisms through our CRM. I think we've probably made good progress when it comes to, you know, when we think of recruitment, there's obviously different stages. The interviewing stage in particular, we've made great progress, but I do think that's the easier one to focus on. So we've things like no manager is allowed to have an FTE or a requirement approved unless they've completed mandatory inclusive hiring training. That, you know, kind of helps them with unconscious biases and things like that. We also make sure that we've balanced interview panels. We have diverse candidate slates as well, so that kind of tells us a little summary of who's applied to the role and who we're putting through at each round. And then there's also an invitation then to tell us if you need some specific requirements or adjustments at interview stage as well. I would say with that, other than physical disabilities like access to buildings and things like that, disclosure is particularly low. I suppose given, you know, what we know externally in society. So recently we partnered with an organisation called Auticon, and they're helping us do a full review on making every aspect of our business, including recruitment, more inclusive and accessible for people with neurodiversity. So I suppose I would say what I would say is that we're making progress, but we still very much have a way to go, and particularly if we think of attraction. So attracting people to the roles, you know, in the first instance, we definitely have a real challenge with, I think, like many organizations, with gender balance at our C-suite and senior level roles in particular. So, you know, if women aren't applying for these senior level roles, there's no way we're going to be able to challenge ourselves in terms of hiring decisions. And we know that women generally won't apply for a role where they can't do just 3 of the tasks. There might be 20 listed and just 3, they won't apply for the role, whereas males are in general will apply when they can do only 3 of those tasks. So we've worked with simplifying our ad copy and using a tool called Textio to remove any bias from our language. This has helped too. And I do think hybrid working has also opened up more opportunities for us in terms of access as well. So we've removed location from all of our job descriptions, with the exception of those that are based on site or in branches. And this has given us access to a much wider geographical pool with more diverse perspectives.
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, definitely a complex problem with lots of different demographics to think about. Thank you. Max, what have you found to be most beneficial?
Yeah, so again, you know, I'm not in a specific talent acquisition function myself, but I am involved in recruitment into our team within the media agency. So I've kind of brought some helpful insight from our TA leadership in putting together some of the details here. But so my personal role, I work in innovation, which in the media agency context means helping to design consumer-facing experiences on behalf of our brands and our clients. And so in my role, and certainly across Denstu as well, you know, the culture is that innovation is at its greatest when we have diverse teams, inclusive culture, practices that support everybody. And therefore, you know, there was a lot of pressure on recruitment to deliver against that. You know, we face that kind of day by day. So, you know, across the business in recruitment, there is a big drive, therefore, to reflect on unconscious biases. And everybody at Denstu, all employees, are asked to familiarise themselves with the tricks that our biases can play on us, particularly when it comes to recruitment and kind of staffing up. Within our recruitment process, there's been a lot of effort given to more fair and equitable recruitment, and what this looks like in terms of much clear job descriptions, clear language about reasonable adjustments or support, as clear as we can be about flexible working philosophy, as well as the policies and practices, expectations of how time is divided between office and home working. And then when we're looking at the assessment of candidates, we ensure that there are reasonable adjustments made to suit flexibility around working in people's lives, or we don't ask for an interview the next day. That's just madness. We give people plenty of time, we give people options, so that there isn't that unconscious bias that somebody can drop everything and prepare overnight for something. It just doesn't work for working families or working parents. And then I think importantly, once people have joined, it's then about listening, and if something's changed on either side, whether it's within the role that you are occupying, or as the candidate, as the new joiner, something else might have changed. It's about having the conversation and that feedback loop. And certainly from my experience, I work in a global team. I have clients who are dotted all over the place. I have to travel. Everybody understands that personally for me, I need time in order to sort out childcare or move shifts around with my wife and so on. And that certainly is something that I then pass on to the people that I manage. And I think that kind of feedback loop is certainly something that we see within the overall recruitment process across Denstu.
Thank you. I love that piece about the transparency of the policies around flexible working, things up front at the start of the process as well. I think that's really important, as well as that preparation piece. Thank you. Jennifer, what have you found to be most beneficial?
I would echo a lot of what's been said in terms of what works. One of the things that we've done, another signatory, is the End Salary History Pledge that we've signed up to in recent years. And I think, that's about making recruitment more inclusive, not necessarily about flexibility, but not pinning people in to the salaries that they've previously had, which can affect all sorts of minority groups or women who are not a minority, and prevent people jumping up in careers, but making it more about the salary that's relevant to the skills and the bands of salaries that are relevant to certain roles. We do recruit flexibly from day one ahead of the legislation, so that's already there. But thinking about the impact on other employers and mindful of our wish to kind of get through this quickly on this question, one of the things that we've done, and I think Working Families have campaigned similarly, about encouraging employers to make policies visible to new hires. So one of the big pieces of research, another big piece that we do every 2 years, is our parental leave and family support benchmark, which we've just published this year's one. And we've been tracking in that whether employers make their policies visible to new hires. 67%, so 2/3 now do that. We've been consistently making the link that you tell us, as the research shows, that your biggest driver for for parental leave policies is talent attraction and retention, and yet often the policies are secret, so people have to ask about them, which can feel quite exposing in an interview process. So I think bringing about that influence to help employers join the dots on making policies visible. And also preventing employers, sort of flipping the question, having to recruit new heads by improving retention in the first place. So where organisations have had our parental leave programs in place, in-person coaching, online coaching, the online app and so on, that's tended to increase their maternity and similar return rates by 12 to 14 percentage points. So I think not to lose sight of the fact that retention for many employers is a really key focus right now, in addition to recruitment.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jennifer. And also for people to continue their careers, as the example we were talking about at the beginning with my situation in the past as well, having those things in place massively helped. And big fan of that pledge about the salary history and ending that as well. So thank you. Well, this is great. We're not too far behind time, so we have got some time for the questions to be asked that people have been putting forward. So we've got a great question here, Kelly, if you're happy to answer. How could someone that does not have lived experience but is in a position to change policy and practices around flexible working ensure that what they're offering is suitable and effective?
I think the answer here is for me is really simple, and it is to ask the question. So whether that's, you know, doing focus groups, whether it's getting out and talking to colleagues that you think will have the input that you need, whether it's using data from your colleague surveys that you run, it's asking the question. Most, and I mentioned earlier, most of the time colleagues know what they need themselves, and it's empowering them to make that decision themselves and giving them the flexibility then to put that in place. So I would definitely ask the question, and sometimes it's, you know, what's needed is not always possible, so it's kind of finding that middle ground.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, by having those conversations and the transparency, you build the trust and people understand why things can work or can't work. So yeah, fully agree with you, Kelly. Max, I have a question for you as well around how can senior leadership ensure an open, inclusive and supportive culture so that people feel they can talk about the flexibility they need?
Yeah, I think, you know, self-reflection is really important here, and sometimes that can be a bit uncomfortable. I think one of the things that is quite useful is looking at, you know, what the ambition is, then looking at what the reality is and what the blockers or barriers might be. And, you know, the ambition from senior leadership can be one thing, but you then need, whether it's anonymized or you need focus groups, you need people who are kind of living the day-to-day to contribute and say, you know, this is what the reality is, these are the blockers, and actually therefore this is how we get around that. And I think that kind of multi-level conversation is the only way of really achieving that, certainly from my perspective. But again, I don't come at it from a traditionally kind of HR perspective.
I think that's what makes it refreshing, Max. It's good to hear a different perspective. Okay, I have a question for you, Jennifer, as well. You'll have to bear with me a second because it's quite a wordy one, but an important one as well. So it was just referring back to the poll that we had at the beginning. It said the poll showed that one of the biggest challenges attendees are facing is embedding flex in site-based roles. I love the sound of the Bright Flex initiative that Jennifer talks about for nursery staff. What advice can the panel give to help any organisations who might be struggling to offer flex to frontline staff? Are there any other initiatives that they have created and could share which might also help staff?
Great question, and you know, really important that when we think about flexibility, we think about how people deliver the work that they do, and that it's not simply about remote working, which has become one of the sort of taglines for flexibility. Well, one of the things I think that in addition to flexible hours, which is what Bright Flex addresses, I think a lot of it is about reminding ourselves about the work that people do. You know, every piece of research we come across these days tells us that particularly the rising generations are looking at the purpose of the work that they do, and they're holding employers to account for the value that they have in society. Very often people in frontline roles are doing really profoundly important work, whether it's like our early years educators educating the youngest citizens, whether it's the NHS, which we also work with, who are doing what they do so famously and brilliantly, whether it's people in restaurants serving food, you know, and giving people a good time. They're doing work that's really valued right there where it's delivered. So I think there are practical things that one can do, and there are cultural things. So the practical things include things like having specific schemes, as we mentioned, but also things like team rostering, you know, enabling, building a strong sense of team and enabling that team to work together because they will know each other's requirements, enabling them to think about how they schedule and how they cover. And also particularly making sure that it's not only certain individuals that get preference, so that everybody's requirements are taken into consideration. And I'm thinking here particularly of people who are carers of adult dependents. They're often less visible than parents, for example, but really important to have some flexibility. So I think it's about thinking thoughtfully about rostering and enabling the team to do that together, but also reinforcing the culture about why we're doing what we do, and making sure that people understand why their job being on site is so important. Plus things like restrooms. We've got a big program of improving sort of staff areas around the nurseries. because when you are in a frontline role and you do have a break, that's a really important headspace and a really important chance to relax. So I think looking at the environment people have, looking at the get-togethers they have, and you know, the sort of stand-ups in the morning, or you know, how the team debriefs after something that's been challenging, are all really important parts. Plus, one of the things that's talked about, including you know, by the government and all the major political parties at the moment, is that childcare is a huge enabler of workforce participation. So not to forget that the practical supports like that are needed. So with our staff, there's a very generous salary sacrifice scheme that enables them to have childcare as part of their work. So I think not forgetting things like that enable people to be present on site, so employers can look across the board at that, and we help other employers with workplace nurseries and salary sacrifice schemes for community nurseries. So I think it's a round piece. It's around the practical scheduling, it's around the culture and the purpose, and it's around the other practical supports that go with that.
Thank you, Jennifer. Such a big journey for people to go on, isn't there, in getting the hearts and minds and understanding the why, as well as having the practical tools then to be able to put these things in place. Thank you for all those insights. We're doing really well for time, actually. So we've got another question here, Kelly, if you're happy to answer. It's one about the fact that you've shared some very progressive ways of working here, and a question about what's next. Is there still more that you want to build on, which I think you did touch on previously, that there's still a long way to go, and if so, what does that look like?
Yeah, so great question. And there are a number of priorities for us. As I mentioned, we're working with Autocon at the moment, and we're at review stage of, you know, what actually needs to be done to make sure that we are more inclusive as an employer in the neurodiversity space. I think, you know, we do have quite progressive policies and our people manager training and everything in place, but I think we still have a lot of work to do around showcasing examples, storytelling, to really reduce that stigma, and whether it's about fear for, you know, career progression, or fear of being judged, whatever it is, we still need to really address that stigma, particularly when it comes to mental health. Just yesterday I was on a session with over 500 colleagues in one particular corporate banking division, and one of our very senior, well-known colleagues spoke about, I was invited to talk about the supports that are in place around work-related stress and burnout, but he shared then his personal experience and how he was supported by the bank, how he had to take time off, and how he thought that was going to be the end of his career, the nail in the coffin, for him, and it wasn't. He said, you know, he's better now, and he's returned to his role, and, you know, nobody batted an eyelid, but everybody really supported him. So I think definitely more of that is what we need, you know, to help people feel like they are supported in accessing whatever flexibility they need.
Thank you, Kelly. I think sometimes when we think about what comes next, it can seem very daunting because there's still so much more to think about on all of the different demographics. But I think it's really important to sometimes pause and just think about what people need and listen to the employees that you have. So how you engage with them to do that. There's lots of different ways. I know there's a lot of survey fatigue with organisations who are always putting different surveys out to try and understand, do a bit of a pulse check to see where organisations are. But it could be focus groups, listening groups, having your networks talk about their experiences and what's working and what's not working. But that can help shape the plan that you've got for coming next as well. So massively appreciate that. Thank you, Kelly. Think we might have one more very quick one before I hand back to Jane. And Max or Jennifer, if you're happy, either one or both, there's a question around focus groups. And are there any specific questions or themes you think organisations should be focusing on for parents or caregivers?
Wants to go first? I'll just very quickly. I think actually one of the questions is a bit of a naff answer, but one of the questions can be, what do you want us to focus on? I think one of the things that we've done within the Parent and Carers Committee at Denstu is look at what is coming up within our policy and kind of work within this non-HR function to understand what people think is that we haven't got right yet, or that needs to improve. We've just improved our fertility policy. We've just extended allowance for paternity leave. There's things like that that have come out of that group rather than necessarily from the business down. And I think that just having the focus group in the first place, even if you don't have a set theme, just to understand what people care about that you're not quite, maybe getting right just yet, or looking at the marketplace and seeing what other people are doing and how you can improve and how you can adopt new ways of working, I think is really important.
I absolutely agree. We talked about measurements at the beginning, and I think, how are we doing and what's the impact of what we're already providing? What else do you need? So more quantitative questions, but qualitatively, I think it's always really fruitful to ask in terms of the moments that matter, these sort of hinge moments, such as becoming a parent, becoming a carer, being a parent of older children, managing all the kind of ups and downs of those life changes. How have we done? And to ask people for specific instances, both of when things have gone well, what helped you return confidently from parental leave? What helped you stay on working as a carer? So that informs where it's gone well, but also where it didn't. What could we have done more? It's often about managers, but not only. It's about policies, it's about practice, it's about culture. So I would ask some of those specific questions.
Thank you,
Fantastic.
everyone. I'm going to pass back to Jane.
Thanks so much, Paula. I found that absolutely fascinating. And thank you, everybody, for sharing so much, and particularly to you, Kelly, and to you, Paula. I'm sure that's been incredibly helpful for all kinds of people. So thank you very much indeed. Great discussion. I love ending up on ask the people what they want. Seems to me like a really brilliant suggestion. So we'll be sending the webinar recording to everyone, and we encourage you to share it with your colleagues. For the HR and D&I professionals in our audience, just to let you know, we do offer an employer membership scheme as well as training and consultancy to support your journey towards a more flexible, family-friendly workplace. And finally, just to say, we also encourage all employers to use our Happy to Talk flexible working logo and strap line, which is on our website. And the guidance has been developed together with the government's flexible working task force, and signals to all prospective employees that you're open to working flexibly. Please look out for our follow-up email for more information, or go to our website. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks again, Paula, Jennifer, Kelly, and Max. I think it's been an amazing discussion today. Really useful things to take away, and some inspiration too. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye.